My name is Rob Scott. I, like so many children, grew up in a really, hard and abusive situation in a lot of ways. There was somebody in my life who, uh, for years and years and years, I was sent to have watch me as a babysitter, and they were very, very, it was really, really dark and abusive, and from the age of say 3 to 9 or 10. This was going on for just years and years. And so, what your organization does, right, is so incredibly important because you can, if I had known what to do or who to talk to or how to talk to people or any of that stuff, not only can I imagine that amount of abuse would have been deeply lessened, but maybe it would have, not had to happen at all, right? Maybe I could have known way ahead of time what to do, but instead I was deeply influenced and told to be quiet and, had to put up with things for, far longer than I think people should have to deal with that. And the sad fact is that this is just so prevalent. I mean, there's so much of this going on all over the place. So I think education is really, really important. Awareness about this. I hope that we don't want to have uh, kids being scared and upset by the information, right? So it has to be done in a really careful and caring way. And what I know about this organization is that you guys just do that really, really well. And it's my hope that this can get to more people so that we can stop these kinds of issues from ever happening at all.
Awesome. That's perfect.
Is
Um,
it?
that was absolutely perfect. I think just
Okay.
that we can use just that. I do have a question for you though. Your
Sure.
babysitter, so statistics show that over 90% of child sex abuse happens by a family member or somebody the family knows. So was this a
Hmm.
family member babysitter or was this somebody that the family had gotten to know or
This was somebody who had been in the family as an employee of my grandparents for years and years and years. And so was a trusted, you know, quote unquote, like uncle or something, even though biologically not an uncle, but was, somebody that had been in and around the family for, since my father was a child kind of thing. So, who knows what other abuse might have happened throughout the family and all that stuff. But
yeah.
um, yeah, I know that. Yeah, I got it. It was a very interesting because my parenting wasn't uh, as healthy as it could be, right? So there was a lot of dysfunction just in the immediate family as well, and so having this place to sort of put me at times was used and used maybe more often than I would have liked. And so I would be left there to spend nights and stay there for longer periods of time and sometimes just an afternoon or whatever. And this gentleman would just, find a way to continually, get me alone and do pretty terrible things. And yeah, and I mean, it led in my life to massive dysfunction for decades. I started doing drugs when I was 7 years old. I ended up homeless and in and out of all kinds of institutions as a young adult. I barely got through school. I mean, I wasn't paying attention to school or doing homework or doing any of that stuff. And so, my start in life, me getting wherever I've gotten to today was, stunted in a huge way by literally decades, and so just I sometimes wonder what could I have done, right? I don't have a degree to this day, right? So I didn't do the
Same.
college thing. I didn't do any of that stuff. So, what might have been different had I had security and safety and, the proper challenges instead of just having me, I remember back, it was almost like I dissociated so deeply that it was, what would feel like I would imagine multiple personalities would be. Like I had to almost take on a certain kind of split to endure some of the things that were going on.
Wow.
And then, the work I do today is to help heal and make people whole in a really meaningful way. And a lot of that is based on how I saw myself kind of splintering into survival personalities and just ways that I would lie to myself that I was safe and think, just because the
Yeah.
reality was almost, unbearable. So yeah, it was very, very difficult. And then it led to a big split in the family. I mean,
Mhm.
there's days of stories and things I could talk about with how much difficulty it led to and what it sort of cost me in my life. In some sense now, it's a big part of what I'm trying to help with and what I'm trying to change. And so that's why I care about organizations like yours, because it's very important that we fix this dysfunction, right? That we can help. And there may be a lot of different ways to do that help, and education
Mhm.
is at the core of that for sure, right? If we don't know about it,
Absolutely.
we can't do much about it. So yeah.
Yeah. What age were you when you finally spoke out about it?
I was so afraid to speak out about it because there were threats, and it felt very dangerous. I ended up, he was giving me pornography and things like that it was not pretty attractive pornography. It was really pretty disgusting and gross stuff.
Same. Mhm.
And I happened to know that my older sister was breaking into a little safe, like a child safe, where I would keep money and things like that. And
Yeah.
so I hid them in there so that they could be discovered. That was my way of finally finding a way to
Mm.
uh, be found out, so I didn't have to tell or whatever. And um, yeah, I found out recently that she had found those sooner, but she didn't feel comfortable saying that she had broken into my stuff to find it. And then eventually it weighed on her heavy enough that she told my mother. My parents had divorced during this time, so it started when we were all they were still married, but at this point I lived in a different place than my dad, and then it became almost an argument between my parents. You know, uh, a lot of it was, thinking I might be lying and, that kind of stuff. And so just not being believed, not having that, and then being sent back because I hadn't been believed, and then having it come out again. So, having a parent feel like they're supposed to come to your aid and maybe save you and be the hero, and then instead almost, not almost, exactly sort of send you back to some of the abuse. And um, yeah, that was a huge betrayal in a way for me. That was pretty difficult to get over as well.
Absolutely. We
Yeah.
find that a lot of parents, especially those,
Um, and just, a lack of trust for anything that just being able to trust anything as safe and okay.
mm,
To feel good to have a sexual relationship as an adult
mhm,
took me so much work, to feel safe in that space. I yeah, just, I mean, it affected how I went to the bathroom. It affected, all
everything.
kinds, everything, right? So
Yeah.
it affected everything. I remember being, going through a ton, excuse me, of the therapy that I went through to work on this stuff, and having this sense of it just being this like immovable black, like grossness kind of in me that had its
Mm,
tentacles like all through me. And
yeah.
what it felt like for a really long time is that I was supposed to like process that and get it out. And I remember the day where there was this deep realization where I was like, oh no, that is you, right? Like that's not,
Mm,
this is something that's a part of the makeup of who
yeah.
you are. And so um, it wasn't ever going to necessarily get out of me in the way that I'd hoped to get away from it. And so, it has to be dealt with in a different way. And that's, to your point, it's so costly and difficult and
Yeah.
has so many familial challenges and just the basics of like living your life, right? Like knowing how, once you get into addiction and you get into these things, you start not developing the other sort of adulting skills of just managing money or being able to make your own food or being
Oh,
able to
right.
shop or keep a house clean or whatever, right? It all just becomes um hard and pretty terrible. And in the subjective sense, the shame and the self-hatred
Yeah.
and the it's not all looking out there. You end up sort of folding it back on yourself and thinking that you're wrong or broken, that maybe you deserved it, maybe, all that kind of stuff. And so yeah, it's a deep thing that obviously when you look at something like this, having the cost of it, obviously not just in all the ways that it's just horrible and costly and difficult. The solution is way back at the source. So, can we
Yeah.
prevent this? Can we do something where this doesn't have to happen?
Sure.
And if it does begin happening, can it stop as fast as possible instead of having it go on for years and years and years? So, what is that
Yeah.
education? How can we let people know? How can we let the right adults know? How can we let teachers know? How can we let parents know?
Yeah.
What should we teach kids about this? Right.
Mhm.
All of that seems incredibly important, and not to be trite, but sunlight is the disinfectant, right? The awareness. These
Yes.
things can thrive in the dark, right? They can sort of live and grow and keep expanding in the darkness. And so the transparency that's needed to look at this and face it, and that's, I think, what begins to heal it. So yeah.
Absolutely. That I find that in all cultures, so child sex abuse doesn't discriminate, right? And